Many of you will not be surprised to learn that I'm not only in the podcast creation production business, I also am in the business of devouring podcasts as well. Like many of you, I'm a podcast junkie, and these are my fixes. For Heaven's Sake with Daniel Hartman and Yossi Klein Halevi from the Shalom Hartman Center. And then there's Real Time with Bill Maher, and there's Fresh Air with Terry Gross from NPR. Honestly with Barry Weiss, where honestly I don't always agree with everything that she says, but honestly I'm always intrigued and challenged by it. And then also from the Hartman Center, there's Identity Crisis with Yehuda Kurtzer. And there's Isaac Saul, who does this amazing job of balancing all these different opinions on his podcast, Tangle. And then Richard Address, who does Jewish Sacred Aging. Look, you get the picture. I can go on and on. But my latest podcast crush is a woman named Kate Mishkin. She is a really interesting and compelling woman. She is a journalist who has spent time in a number of places. She's covered some very interesting stories, which we will get to later. But there is a major reason that I've become a Mishkinian, or I could make a really bad pun and say that this year I will be attending the University of Michigan. This is her podcast that has its own really bad pun, which I envy and I covet, and that's Shofar, So Good. From the Religion News Service, I'm Jeff Salkin, and this is Martini Judaism, for those who want to be shaken and stirred. Hey, Kate, great to have you.
Thanks for having me. What an intro and what a media diet you have. I'm impressed.
What do you listen to as well?
Oh, man. Some of yours. I think Terry Gross does it better than anyone.
Yes.
I've always been a This American Life person.
I want to be Terry Gross when I grow up.
Yeah, that media diet. I don't know how she consumes everything that she interviews everyone about. Yeah, if it's new and interesting, I try to check it out.
There's a great podcast called The History of Rock and Roll in 25 Songs.
Oh, I don't know it.
Oh, you got to listen to it. It's great.
Okay.
Absolutely great. Okay, so enough about podcasts. Let's talk about you. Tell us your story. How'd you get here? Who are you?
My name is Kate Mishkin. I'm from LA. My parents are Jewish, mostly, and we can get into that, what that means. But grew up here and hated it, and then moved to Virginia and West Virginia to be a reporter. And I've been a podcast producer and reporter for about a decade and never told a story about myself until Shofar So Good.
And the story is really compelling, and we'll get to it. It's not that it's an uncommon story. I think what makes it so beautiful is that there are so many people out there who could tell a similar and parallel tale.
You know, I should have known that starting out, and I really, really did not. I really had this assumption, especially growing up in LA, where all my friends had bar and bat mitzvahs, and they had Passover dinner and Shabbat. It was really just something that just happened for so many people I knew, and I kind of, growing up around that, I kind of felt like I was the outlier because I wasn't raised necessarily with those traditions. And I was the only person in this world who had a conflicted idea of what it meant to be Jewish and where I fit in. And of course, as I've put the show out, I've heard from so many, there's so many variations of the story that I have.
Okay, so let's go immediately to that. I was going to hold up to later, but we're there already. So you're raised in an interfaith family. Okay, this makes you very unusual. You're the only person in America to have two parents who are not of the same religion.
Right, exactly, yes. Or to even have a agnostic or ambivalent relationship toward those religions.
I am shocked. I'm totally shocked.
I know. It's a...
You are a unicorn or a junicorn. You're a unicorn. A total unicorn. Okay, so... But the thing is, and I learned this about you listening to your podcast on Shofar So Good, which I totally covet. You said that you were raised with the religion of what people call Jewish values.
Right.
This is going to be the part where we push back a little bit. This is what makes it interesting. So what were those values, and what makes them specifically Jewish?
Yeah, I love that you're asking that, because that's the question I have too.
I know. It's a big one, right?
It's a huge one. And I think in some ways, I think my parents did their best. I think that also, as I've learned, the way that generation felt about religion is very common. But it's a little bit of a cop-out to say that, okay, well, we have Jewish values. Well, yeah, what are those values and how are they different than anything else? And that's the thread that I started to pull with Shofar So Good, which is okay, I think I understand that, we focus on life. We focus on who we are while we're here, that it's not so much what happens in the afterlife, that it's how we live our lives right now. That is a Jewish value. That's something that I learned. But, the way that ripples out, how we act while we're here, what we do, how we treat each other, is it Jewish? It's a great question.
But what you just described, to be fair, is a general humanistic value.
Of course.
So I'm always at this place, Kate, and I've been writing about this for years, as to what Jewish values really are and how do we separate them from the religion of my classical Reformed childhood, where the message that came from the pulpit was usually, it's nice to be good and it's good to be nice.
Yeah, and I would say, what's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the point, except I'm always trying to figure out, what do you got to do? What values do we have that sets us apart from the rest of the world and simultaneously would allow us to lift up the world? So like you and I had this conversation, and your homework assignment was to pour through my new book, Tikkun Ha'am, Repairing Our People, Israel and the Crisis of Liberal Judaism, to be made into a major motion picture.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yes, Timothy Chalamet.
Oh, he's signed on. He's
going to be me.
Yes, from Bob Dylan to you. It makes sense. I see it.
I thought Edward Norton was brilliant as Pete Seeger, and I would have liked him to play me.
Okay, well, maybe he's free.
All right. So here's the thing. So one of the things that I write about in this book is that we have these general liberal values that we talk about. Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, people are made in God's image, etc. It just comes out sounding like a bunch of bumper stickers and a bunch of Hallmark greeting cards, doesn't it sometimes?
You've given me a lot to think about. I don't know that those values are necessarily bumper sticker values. I think they've probably been co-opted and created that by people like me who that's their entry point to Judaism.
Which is why I'm not pushing back totally, and it's why I cut back on the snark a little bit, because, there's this division in me between this intellectual and the guy who just wants to reach out to people and say what I think and what some of my friends and colleagues and fellow cultural critics might think is overdone and getting a little bit tedious. In fact, could be someone's door into the tradition.
Right. I mean, I loved what you said about the people show up to Israel and say, what's Tikkun Olam in Hebrew?
Well, yes.
That's hilarious and right.
And one of the things that I was playing with is the idea that we have to move from Tikkun Olam to Tikkun Ha'am, going from repairing the world to repairing our people, and then throwing in, this is kind of interesting, the third Tikkun, the third repair of Tikkun Atzmi, which is repairing myself. And that all three of those things, I think, are important to a Jewish diet.
I think the thing that I was left with after reading that was, well, what needs repair?
Well, this is a really important point. I want to get to what needs repair. So you and I started playing with an idea that is really radical now, that you and I can invent a whole new category of tikkun. Because we're talking now about a month and a half into the Trump administration. Have I made it clear to you how much I disdain this administration?
No.
Okay. Would you like to know that?
Sure.
Okay. I really do.
Okay.
I really do. I think they're raising some really important questions. I just don't like their answers. And not only do I not like their answers, some of the answers are not the worst answers, but they're using this chainsaw where a nail file would be more appropriate.
Right.
So I'm saying to myself, okay, Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, Tikkun Ha'am, repairing our people, Tikkun Atzmi, repairing ourselves through prayer and study, meditation, and everything. But now I'm wondering if there's another thing. Tikkun HaMedina, repairing the state, repairing our country. And I'm wondering what Jewish values we should be dragging into that conversation.
I think it begs the question, again, what is a Jewish value? But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I don't think a Jewish value has to be only a Jewish value, which is to say that throughout history, Judaism has been nurtured and has been nurtured by the surrounding culture, right?
Yeah.
More often, classically, we gave our values to the world. And one of the things I write about in my book is that I think that we have started to inhale some values from the ambient culture that are not necessarily good for the perpetuation of Judaism, or for that matter, civilization, radical individualism, and over-reliance on technology, that sort of stuff that you and I would agree on.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be some cultural war that is fought there, even a gentle one. So yes, justice. I think the idea of compassion. I think the idea of kings being susceptible, if not to the common will, but susceptible to the Torah itself. Deuteronomy says that the king has to write a Torah scroll and has to have it with him, so to speak, on the throne, which means that we have a bigger story that we are part of. And I think for a lot of American history, that was a really big deal. And I think that we've started to abandon that. Where are you on this one?
I think you raised some really interesting points. I mean, I think that religion is a thorny one, because I think we need community. I think that's been well established. We're lonely people. We're acting in our own self-interest. Our heads are in our phones. However, I think religion, I'm going to take this two ways. Religion, I think, makes people do some, unjust things. However, in my research and, my bent is that Judaism is the right thing. So how are we supposed to, I don't know that that's fair for me to say that one religion is, has values that is better than others. I'm not sure I would want to say that.
Well, here's the thing about the role of religion in America and everyday life. Number one, while it is true that the founders never wanted a particular religion to be the religion of the state, and as a matter of fact, in the 13 original colonies, most of those colonies had their state religion, their official religion. So the United States of America wouldn't have that, number one. Number two, but they never believed that there would be a divorce of religion from everyday life. In other words, religion as religion would permeate society because religious values are important. And you can't separate the vision of the founders, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, from a biblical vision. That would be kind of wrong. But now you say something really interesting about how religion can be used for all sorts of bad reasons. And I'm going to go to the words of the late lamented chief rabbi of Britain, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who said something like, religion makes good people better and makes bad people worse.
That's exactly right.
And right now, you and I are interested, and we are part of a tradition that says it makes good people better because it gives you at least a text to go along with, as opposed to simply making it up for yourself.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it should encourage us to be better people. What that means to be a better person is, I guess, we could talk about, and what that means to be a better citizen of the country, we could also talk about. I think a lot of people have different ideas of what that means.
But we've lost the idea of citizenship, haven't we?
Of course, yes.
And here's the problem. We've allowed this kind of extreme nationalism to invade the rooms that used to be occupied by patriotism. And I'm a patriot. I'm just not a chauvinist.
Right.
And I think that's true of most people in America. So what we want some kind of we want a kind of community. We want, we want that sort of thing that you feel when you go into a Starbucks, or where you used to go into a Starbucks before it became like, the McDonald's of caffeine.
Right.
A sense of going in and just feeling like, cheers. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and religion could be that whole idea of the third place, which is disappearing in America. I think religious institutions could be that third place.
I think they could, and I think they should. And I think that what's wonderful about Judaism, I suppose you could say this about other religions, but there are these auxiliary. It's not just about going to synagogue. It's about going to Shabbat dinner. It's about having a Passover Seder. There are all these different ways, these intersections in which we meet each other in Judaism, that build community, and each is on its own. One is once a year, one is once a week. I think these things are really important, especially, just kind of that recurring, they talk about this when they talk about, making friends. It's like, you have to see a person like 3 times to be a friend. And I think that, being forced to attend the same thing and see the same people with repetition, there's nothing better than that. I think that's
it's about practice.
Yeah,
It's about practice. That's really interesting. So one of the things that Judaism has that other religions don't have, or they might have, but, I'm not in the business of saying we're better.
Same. We shouldn't be. Yeah.
It's useless. I just can't play that game. You know why I love Judaism? It's mine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like my family doesn't have to be the best family on the block, but I love it because it's mine. And
Great.
By the way, if there are things in other religions that I might covet, or, I might want to find that in Judaism as well. I might want to find that place that touches the soul as well. But one of the things that Judaism has down pretty well, except we don't do it well enough or often enough, is the whole domestic sense of that what gets played out happens at the table.
That's interesting. Say more about that. I want to make sure I understand.
My Christian friends actually, when they break the 10th commandment and they covet stuff in my tradition, what they covet is Shabbat.
Okay.
They covet Passover. Now they have Sunday dinner, and they have an Easter meal, etc. But what they lack is a ritualized experience around the table that is a regular reminder of who they are. It is my sense, and I could be wrong. Right now, the phones are lighting up. It is my sense that much of Christianity in America is a faith that's lived out publicly in public spaces, as opposed to private spaces. And what's really interesting to me is that I do have Christian friends who pray before meals, and they do so even when it's not a Sunday or whatever. It is part of their lives, and I think I like that. I know I like that, and they like the sense of the family gathering around the table and telling a story.
Right.
Their stories are played out in public worship spaces.
Yeah.
As is ours, but our story, we're recording this a few days before Purim, and then a month from now it's going to be Pesach, and people are already starting to figure out what they're going to be doing for Seder. That's the telling of our story.
There's something innately powerful about storytelling and innately Jewish about storytelling.
Which you do really well. I've been to a lot of states in this country. I've never been to West Virginia. What was it like? He said.
You're missing out.
Oh my God. I hear it's gorgeous though, right?
It's gorgeous. It's one of the most rewarding places I've ever been to and lived, because the cohesion is so strong. And I don't just mean that with the people. There's obviously a sense of community, but there's what I really liked as a reporter was that there's a real through line of storytelling that we were talking. And I came as a reporter covering the environment, and specifically came covering coal and natural gas just at the beginning of President Trump's first term.
For the Charleston Gazette-Mail, if I'm correct.
Exactly, for the Charleston Gazette-Mail. And what I really liked was that coal played such an important role in the state's history and legacy, and natural gas, because of economic factors and things pertaining to that, natural gas was kind of edging that out, which brought in new conflict, that it's almost larger than life, that there are coal families and that there are coal traditions, and what happens when that's edged out. And then when natural gas comes in, and does natural gas, do they make the same mistakes that coal did? And often, many cases it was. And to cover climate change we weren't just covering climate change because it was important, but because it had something to do with natural gas and coal. And I really like that these factors kind of played together. It wasn't like I showed up at the newspaper every morning and was like, well, I'll cover this today. I was covering it because of something that happened. And it felt linear and like a story, that each of these played into the same story, if that makes sense.
So yes, it does, because you see, in the years that I lived in Florida, I became very much aware of climate issues, but those climate issues were expressed through the concern about sea level rise.
Yeah, right.
Rising waters, floods, hurricanes, etc. And I started figuring out how many major Jewish communities and minor Jewish communities are 10 miles away from a shoreline in America, and a whopping number of them. But it was my own cultural bias and geographical bias that made me unaware, and I needed to become reaware of how climate is playing out in the hinterlands. Now, I've been to Pittsburgh a lot of times. I have this urban crush on Pittsburgh.
Same. Me too.
It's a wonderful place. So the thing about Charleston, West Virginia, we have to own up to this, we coastal people. Mm-hmm. I think that Appalachia gets a bad rap, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And this is what I found very complicated, which is, on one hand, I'm highly defensive of the place. These are, beautiful people and beautiful communities. It's a place that needs to be fought for, and we should care about it. And they're not less than us because they don't live near an ocean. I don't know. It's just one of the most wonderful places I've ever lived. However, in many ways, it's a hateful place. Or I should say the people could be hateful. It was the first time in my life I'd faced anti-Semitism.
Wow.
Which is, amazing that I made it that far. But
popular culture sidebar is that there's a book that I read. It came out at the same time as Hillbilly Elegy. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a more scholarly book. In fact, it has to be. It's called White Trash. Okay. Which is a horrible term. Mm-hmm. And it really talked about how this is like before you were born, but many of my listeners will know this, how in the mid-'60s or so, there was an entire genre of television shows that poked fun at people who live in Appalachia and people who live in the South. Beverly Hillbillies, mm-hmm. Green Acres, Andy of Mayberry, Gomer Pyle. And they have gotten, I think, the cultural short shrift in this country.
I totally agree. These are narratives perpetuated by, the people making this art they're people on the coast. It's not it's a projection. It's not real.
And yet you encountered hatred there.
And yet, that's what's so complicated. And that's what, that's it's almost, that's the tragic part of life, to have both things in one place and to be able to hold both. And I think that I encountered it, and we can talk about that, but it didn't make me hate the place. It made me hate the specific people and I'm not sure I even hated them. I think I felt sorry for them and tried to move on, and I don't know, it informed my Judaism, and that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. And we're going to come back in a few minutes. We're going to talk more about Charleston, West Virginia. We're going to talk about the Jewish life that Kate discovered there. We're going to talk about the rabbi that she discovered there. We're going to talk about the Kate that she discovered there. We'll be back. And once again, hi from the Religion News Service. I'm Jeff Salkin. This is Martini Judaism, for those who want to be shaken, stirred. Hanging out with me today is Kate Mishkin, who is a journalist, a writer, a podcaster. And when you're done listening to this, just please download Shofar So Good, because it really is good. And we're just talking about Jewish identity. And before the break, we left Kate Mishkin in Charleston, West Virginia, a place where she discovered great love, wonderful people, and she also discovered that some people were hateful. Okay, so you're in Charleston, and you discovered the synagogue.
Yeah, I did. For my entire life, I've felt this profound loss and also a pull toward Judaism. And, Charleston was the second place that I'd lived. I went to college in Illinois. That somewhat counts. Then moved to Virginia, didn't know anyone, and then moved to West Virginia. So maybe this is the third place that I moved where, everything is like in the trunk of my car. I don't know anyone. I don't have any furniture. There's nothing for me except for a job. And even then, actually, I showed up in the paper declaring bankruptcy. So, was there a job? We didn't know. But kind of I have a, little checklist of things that I do when I move to a new place and don't know anyone. One is like, go get a library card. And the other is go see what's going on at the synagogue, because maybe those felt like my people.
And what did you find?
Well, I found, it's a also a complicated answer because what I found was good people, and I didn't feel at home. I still had that nagging feeling of, I don't understand, everyone here is from here. They're speaking a language I don't know. It was an older group of people. They clearly all grew up together. They all raised their kids together. And I felt a little alienated. And by the way, so I went to the Reform synagogue because that's where I felt that's probably me. But I knew this other rabbi because he kind of kept showing up on the Capitol steps. He kept on protesting and being, if there was some sort of issue of social justice, I guess, but also just like topical things in Charleston or legislation that was being passed, he was around to comment on it. And his name was Rabbi Victor Yurecki, and he was at the conservative synagogue. And I never really, I had a hard time holding both in my head because he seemed like a cool guy. Like, I really admired him, but I didn't go to his synagogue because it was the conservative one, and that's not how I was raised, and I was confused. And only after I left did I kind of get to know him better and really wish that I think I probably would have felt way more at home in Charleston had I attended his synagogue regularly.
So you come there, you're the product of an interfaith marriage, and you're starting your Jewish journey. So what happens?
So what happens was I came with this lacking that, not only do I not have religion, but I'm also all alone in the state, and going to the synagogue and starting to kind of collect feelings of what it meant to be Jewish. And I would say two things really informed me and my sense of Judaism while I was in Charleston, and neither is a good thing, but one was people I thought were my friends who would say anti-Semitic things to me, sometimes in casual ways, but sometimes these were people who would have too much to drink, and they would start really railing on me. Like, that felt like, okay, this is not casual. This is something that you felt inside, that not until you basically were drunk or at a bar did you feel comfortable saying this to me. Really hateful.
Oh.
Yeah. And then the other thing that happened, my boyfriend was a reporter at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, so I would go from Charleston to Pittsburgh every other week. So I was living there when the Tree of Life shooting happened. And that was profoundly impactful to me as a Jew. And my boyfriend covered it. They won the Pulitzer Prize. I'm very, very, very proud of them for the paper, for the way that they covered this. But yeah, I'll never forget driving by the synagogue and seeing.
I think for many people what happened in Pittsburgh was, a shofar blast. So I want to get back to the shofar. Let's talk about your project. Let's talk about what you're trying to do in Shofar So Good. You had this experience in Charleston. You had a connection with the rabbi. You discovered your identity. Tell us more about Shofar So Good.
It felt like the right time to ask these questions. In some ways, I felt like I'd done everything I possibly could to figure out what it meant to be Jewish. I tried these synagogues. None really felt right. When I moved back to LA, I tried these kind of like young adult Jewish groups, and that felt maybe even like too cultural, it didn't feel substantial enough to me. I did Birthright. I did volunteering at Jewish food pantries. Nothing made me feel like I was more Jewish, and yet I felt a pull. And so I thought, well, I'm a journalist. I know how to make a podcast. Luckily, at the same time, found an opportunity for funding, and it felt like the right time to start asking these questions. And at first, it was way different. I was going to do like a drunk history kind of thing. And then as soon as I started interviewing people, I was, this is deep, and this is like pulling at stuff within me that I didn't expect to find.
I've been listening to your podcasts, to coin a phrase, religiously. I found several of them really, really compelling. I mean, all of them, but let's talk about prayer and what that means to you.
It started as something very, very confusing. Like I said, I'd go to Charleston or go to synagogue, specifically in Charleston, and people were praying, and I didn't understand what they were saying. I didn't understand why they were saying it. I don't read Hebrew, and the idea of prayer felt very alienating to me. I didn't understand it. And then I spoke to different rabbis, and they made different cases. One made the case that, okay, you don't have to understand it, but this is what your ancestors said. And this is, any Jew around the world at the same time is saying the same thing. And boy, if you feel disconnected, like maybe that's the answer, to be, just kind of in ritual with the same with people who are saying the same thing. Another rabbi explained it as, related to belief in God, but that it's like an imperfect parent. You're not praying for something to happen. You're just you're voicing and expressing yourself and, talking to something that's larger than yourself. And my relationship with prayer is ever changing, as I think it should. And I think that as I think as my understanding of Judaism becomes more sophisticated, this might change. But I'm really attracted to this idea. And I think it makes us better people to be in belief of something beyond ourselves.
Is that God?
Isn't that the question? My personal belief is yes. But that's my choice to believe that.
So I'll just be candid. I think for me, personal prayer is a real challenge. I was just wondering how you've squared that circle and how you can help people with that.
I think it started for me with gratitude. It also started with me around this time last year that I started to think about prayer. A couple of things had happened in my life. I was laid off from a job. I was working like 20 hours a day. I felt that this is personal, but up to that point in my life, I'd felt that I was on a really linear path and that I had done everything right. I just felt at a total loss with myself. And I just felt, depleted and pathetic. And I started going on these walks and looking around and saying I live near the ocean and I live near these trees and this is crazy. This is crazy that these ducks are still here. It's there's something a little silly and ridiculous about it, but it made me, I think, starting with that gratitude of I cannot believe how lucky I am that I live in this world that's so beautiful. And I think from there, I started thanking God for that and then just expressing myself to God. And I've never heard anything in return, but that's what faith is.
I once said to someone that in life we have two choices. It's either attitude or gratitude.
I really like that. I think I agree.
And then I really loved your podcast on forgiveness. And I think prayer and forgiveness are really linked to each other because, again, they're about that repairing of the inner life.
Yeah, I agree. And that's another one of these things that, when I thought about being Jewish or when I thought about these it was almost like moving around the world with a metal detector. And, I'd get to Yom Kippur and feel it's going off. Something feels right about this. The metal detector is going off, but I can't tell. Something's there, and I don't understand how to get closer. And which is to say that every year, the holy days come around, and I have no idea what's going on, and I feel lost, and it's this perpetual cycle. But I knew that I liked this idea of forgiveness, and in the process, repairing oneself and repairing one's relationships. I think when we talk about Jewish values, that's one that I think is Jewish, the way that we treat other people. Maybe it's not Jewish, but it is to me.
No, it's totally Jewish. I mean, just because something is more than Jewish doesn't make it less than Jewish. Right?
Yeah, great point.
Right?
You're totally right. Yes. Yeah, and so I kind of examined that by talking to different kids about, the way that they asked for forgiveness. And then I spoke to rabbis who advised me on the particulars and how to do it and what to, actually do on Yom Kippur. And then I spoke to my sister who talked to me about kind of her secular version of forgiveness, but she talked about her relationship with sobriety and having to go atone and what she'd learned. And I think those three things in conjunction really gave me a much more sophisticated understanding of what it means to say sorry.
I'm not so sure that the struggle for sobriety and the journey towards that is secular. I think it's profoundly religious.
You think so?
I think so.
I'd love to explore that more.
I think that it's profoundly religious because it is about repairing oneself. And it is, as I understand from 12-step teachings, it is about confronting and being accountable to the people whom you've hurt. And I think accountability is a big part of the religious life.
Yeah. Which I think brings it back to something we talked about earlier, which is we should all be a little bit more accountable. We should not treat our relationships or our politics or our country with no accountability. We should think about the way that our actions affect other people.
Well, I think that's really large. And it brings me to just another podcast that you're doing. I'm just pulling out your greatest hits because I've been just really really enjoying Shofar so good is about Shabbat. How does this all, we touched on it, but how does that become the gift that just keeps on giving?
Right. Well, this was another metal detector moment for me in that I knew.
Can we back up a little bit?
Yeah.
Can you say more about metal detector moments? This I just need for our listeners to understand this better. By the way, and me too.
Yeah. I'm building this plane as I'm flying it, but I think I just mean like I imagine myself, maybe on an empty beach or something with a metal detector, and maybe the beach is Judaism, and I guess to say that like not every part of Judaism has always lit up for me. I'm not like, I don't feel the same way about like Purim as I do about like the high holidays, or I don't know. There are other things that didn't ring for me, but there are these things that that I've passed over with the metal detector that really start beeping.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's great because I had a different sense what the metal detector was, which is, going through security in the airport, right? So you're talking about one of those things that you bring to the beach to find metal objects, coins, right?
Yeah. Which I've never done, but I've seen other people do, and it seems right. So I'll stick with that.
So wait, just to continue the metaphor, if I have this right, Kate, there's this Jewish stuff that's buried in the sand there, and you're walking around trying to find it.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, and I felt that my whole life. I grew up around Judaism. I'm on the beach already. It's not like I had to go find it, but I didn't know, there are these things that really ring for me when I hover over them with the proverbial metal detector.
I think that one of the things that I discovered about you, and I'm sure many of your readers will appreciate, again, you are the product of an interfaith marriage, like many people in America today, and you went on a quest to find out how you become part of this, and you met some interesting people.
Yeah, exactly.
Including a friend of mine, Rabbi Professor Mark Wachowski. What did he teach you about who you are and how you could get to where you want to be?
So I'd been working on this project for about a year and had my 5 episodes planned. And then I heard Rabbi Wachowski on a different podcast from Tablet Magazine talking about patrilineal descent. And it really confused me. It was a metal detector moment I didn't know existed. In Reform Judaism, the idea is that they kind of switched it from mother to father, and with the understanding, though, that the kid be raised Jewish, have these life cycle moments. I was listening to him thinking like, okay, good for me. My dad was Jewish. My mom's dad was Jewish. I'm in the clear. I'm official. And then to hear him say, well, they have to have these life cycle moments made me feel like, what? I didn't have that. I don't think I had a baby naming ceremony.
We can do one right now, by the way.
Oh, okay, great. Well, let's do that afterward.
Okay.
But I had a bat mitzvah when I was like, 25. Like, I didn't fit the bill. And so I brought him on the podcast and asked him a little bit more about what that meant and what the history was in the 80s of why they established it as patrilineal. And I asked him if I was Jewish, and he basically said, not yet, but you could be, and that we do want you. And that left me with a little bit of hope and faith that it was also profoundly affecting to the way that I saw myself, and especially on this journey. I feel like it's a little bit of a cliche to like have kind of a, Deus Ex Machina at like in the on the 4th episode, but this was that for me.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a bit of disappointment there insofar as the child of a Jewish mother doesn't have to do anything that's Jewish, but the father being Jewish, the mother being not Jewish, requires study, community, and timely acts of identification.
Yes, and painful, I would say. I was way more pained than I thought I would be, especially at my friends. And even I have older half-siblings whose mom is Jewish, and they were raised Jewish, and those are my dad's kids, and my dad's, his other kids were not raised that way. It brought up feelings that I'm not proud of. I felt jealous, I felt hurt, and all about, when we talk about this crisis of Judaism, and for me to feel like I really want this, I really, really want to be Jewish in a way that like I have 3 younger siblings. I don't think they share that with me. I'm unique here, and to realize that, you're not as Jewish as you thought you were, it was very hard.
I really understand how you're feeling. The whole patrilineal dissent thing was one of the first votes I cast as a rabbi
No kidding.
in 1982. Yes, and I believe in it. I believed in it. I understood that there had to have been some commitment in a situation where someone is not Jewish according to Jewish law, that you have to sort of go a little bit further in that, insofar as someone wanting to become a citizen of the United States has to learn stuff that someone born here doesn't. And, I've done many conversions in my career, and it's always been about learning and stuff like that. But what I'm hearing you say is that you would have preferred that it's just simply like, let's just throw open the doors and come on in.
I'm really of two minds. I think I would have liked that, but I also understand why that's not right. And I think I welcome the opportunity to know more. There's no doubt that I have questions and that I don't exactly know everything.
But your point, Kate, is moving me and touching me in a way that I hadn't fully expected or developed within myself, which is essentially, is it quote unquote fair to expect more? See, nowadays we don't even call it patrilineal. We call it non-lineal.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
We
that.
just basically say either parent is
Right.
enough to confer a Jewish identity, right?
Right.
And I think that one of the things that it sought to do was to increase Jewish observance and connection and community and content and all, and substance and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And was not designed to keep you out.
Right. And I totally respect that. And I think, I got to this when I was saying that I've been doing these other things. Like I went to, young adult Jewish groups that it was cultural. That didn't make me feel more Jewish. There was not observance there. I think we can dance around it, but I do think that Judaism is many things, but I think it does require some observance. And so to throw open the doors without that, I think is, I think there's a feeling that it has to be earned. And I don't even know that it's that. I think it's just like, you have to understand.
Well, it's the tension, Kate, between being a people and being a religion.
Exactly.
To be a member of a people, well, you can be an Albanian without paying attention to Albanian history and culture. Mm-hmm. You're just an Albanian. But when there's a religion, there's stuff you got to do. So this is something that really confuses a lot of people, both Jews and non-Jews, which is that we are simultaneously a people and a religion. We're a religion that has a people and a people that has a religion. And that we're both what we are and what we strive to be simultaneously.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I've had people, after this episode say, you don't want the religion, you want the bagels. You don't want that. And that's not true.
No. Okay, I'm about to tell you something about my career. Ready?
Yeah.
Despite the fact that Dr. Whatley on Seinfeld supposedly converted for the jokes, no one joins the Jewish people for the jokes.
Right.
No one joins the Jewish people for bagels, which are, by the way, last time I looked, available for everyone.
Right.
And no one joins because of our food. But they join because of the stuff that moves you. Yeah. Prayer, forgiveness, Shabbat, community, a sense of belonging, a sense of having a rabbi. I just love that image of the metal detector. You're walking around the world. You're walking around the beaches of the world. And there are these nuggets buried in the sand that are Jewish nuggets, and you're looking for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boy, if I learned anything in this episode, that was like worth the whole thing. Okay, so I want to go to some of your other things that you've talked about, okay,
Sure.
that you've written about. This is like the lightning round, okay?
Sure, let's do it.
The family that sold bleach as a miracle cure for COVID. Can we talk about these people quickly?
Yeah. Boy, were they on their own journey.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a family who, they found their, was it them or was it the world and the president that allowed them to continue on? I don't know. I think things came together that allowed them to sell bleach for COVID, and now they're serving time. So thanks to our reporting, Etsy took it down. So that's
unbelievable. It's totally believable.
Yeah, some of these things are hard to.
Oh my God. Okay, now the one I've been saving for last.
Sure.
The cult leader. Tell us about the cult.
Yeah, Frederick Lenz, known as Rama. He was a cult leader who well, some people call him a teacher, but cult leader is probably appropriate. In the 90s, he coined this idea of computer programming as a way of meditation, and he got all these people to basically code for him and developed a cult.
He was called Rama.
He was called Rama.
Not ramen.
No.
Because that's a cult about noodles.
That's a noodle cult. Yeah, that's a different story. That's a different podcast. Right.
No one talks about cults anymore. It was a big thing when I was younger.
Yeah, I think so. I think we have different ideas of what it means to be in a cult nowadays. It's a little less cut and dry.
I think you're right. Any final statements? Any final questions? Can I answer any of your questions about Judaism?
Oh my God.
Got me.
Yes, but they're too big. I think I'd have to come
Really?
back to. Well, I don't know.
Hit me with a big one.
Okay, what does that mean to repair? Yeah, tell me about repairing ourselves and what's broken and why now?
Ooh, I love it. Okay, very quickly. This is not about me. It's about you. Okay, here goes. Tikkun Olam is mostly about social justice, making the world better. Tikkun Ha'am, repairing the people, is about how we can help our people. But repairing ourselves, that's your question here.
Yeah.
Through prayer and through study, it's like taking the broken pieces of ourselves and seeing how they all kind of cohere and they fit together. And I think that's the essence of any kind of religious quest, right? It's about how do I find the pieces of who I am and see how they fit into a larger puzzle. So let me give you my little take here. Mm-hmm. Have you ever wondered how many roles you play in your own life?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Right? You're a podcaster, you're a daughter, right?
Yeah.
You're a partner to
I'm
somebody.
I'm a partner. I'm a sister.
You're a sibling, right?
Yep.
You're a friend?
I'm a friend, I like to think.
Got any kids?
No.
Would you like to rent some?
Yes.
Okay. So you're all of these roles, right?
Yeah.
And all of us are trying to figure out, someone once said, we're not one self, we're a committee of selves.
Oh, I love that.
Okay. Or as Walt Whitman said, and Bob Dylan quotes, I contain multitudes.
Sure.
So we're trying to figure out what's the thread that binds it all together so that we can become echad, one, as God is echad. Mm-hmm. If we're made in the divine image and we're like God, then we want to be one as God is in fact one. For me, that's what prayer does. And I approach prayer, Kate, as something that's not only spiritual but also intellectual, because I like to read the prayer. And I really liked what you said earlier, that I think sometimes when I pray, when I go to synagogue, I'm there to have an encounter with the literature of my people, full stop.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is. We've been hanging out with Kate Mishkin, who is the brains and the soul behind Shofar So Good. Now listen, this podcast is really important to me, and when you listen to it, it's going to be really important to you, and it's going to be important to the people that you care about. And she has a Kickstarter campaign to support the sacred work that she's doing. Now listen carefully to me. You're going to write this down. Shofar So Good, SHOFAR, Shofar So Good podcast, one word, .com/support. Just do yourself a favor, support her work. It's really important. She's one of the most viable, vibrant, and personable voices in the emerging Jewish community, and we should be helping people like her. And our producer for Martini Judaism is Jay Woodward. We get production assistance from the ever-talented Julia Wyndham. Martini Judaism is a Blue Jay Atlantic production for Religion News Service. Read my column of the same name. Martini Judaism comes out twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, if there's something at night that's keeping me awake other than coffee. And our podcast, Martini Judaism, for those who want to be shaken and stirred, you can download it, and we want you to, on Spotify, Google, Apple, Audible, wherever you get your podcasts. Download it, listen to it, and please help us and leave us a 5-star rating. Kate, thanks for hanging out with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been such a pleasure.
Oh, I've loved it too. We'll see you again soon, everybody. Take care.